Great, I think we can get started. We've got a few people in here now. So hi everyone, welcome to our session today. Thank you for joining. And in this session, we're going to be having a look at what we can do to support young people's transition into independence. I'll take a minute to introduce myself. I'm Becky. I'm from an organisation called Settle, and I'm one of the programme managers there. So I support the team who deliver frontline work with young people. And today I'm kind of going to be like facilitating a bit of discussion with Emma, who's also from Settle, and Kate from Rock Trust. So today we're hoping that we will be able to showcase how Settle and the Rock Trust support young people into independence. And that hopefully there'll be a few like takeaway points for yourselves who are also supporting young people aged 18 to 25. So whilst we know that the experience of transitioning into independence will be different for all young people, it's often characterised by things such as relationships and education. In this session, we're just going to be focusing on independence in relation to young people's homes, and the way that we're able to work with young people to give them space to express their independence in a supported and a safe way during their transition into independent living. So we know that moving into your first home can be a varied experience. A lot of young people can feel excited about a sense of freedom and independence, but we also know that these positive feelings can exist alongside a bit of an apprehension around the responsibility of having your own home and being expected to meet these responsibilities, where not all young people might have had the opportunity to practice those before. So the transition into independent living is a key moment for many young people. And like I say, today we hope that we're able to share how our organisations hold young people whilst they're on that journey in a way that enables them to have the experience of independence that is afforded to those who might have established support networks. So we're going to start off with some introductions, and then Emma and Kate are going to talk about the work that each of our organisations do, and then move on to a discussion around best practice in supporting young people, and then hopefully have some time at the end for some Q&As. So we do have a Q&A function on Zoom. So if you have some questions, please do pop them in the Q&A function, and then we'll spend some time at the end of the session answering some of those questions. So I am going to hand over to Emma from Settle to introduce herself, and then also introduce the work that Settle does as well. So I'm just going to, Emma, do you want to introduce yourself while I start sharing the presentation?
Of course, thanks Becky. Hi everyone, so yeah, I'm Emma from Settle. I'm a coach and we support young people, predominantly care experience young people, with the transition into independent living. So as one of the coaches, I work one-to-one with the young people all across London. So I'm going to do a bit of a presentation. It's quite a whistle-stop tour, but as Becky said, we've got some time for question and answers afterwards. But hopefully it answers a few of the questions as we go along.
Great. Are you able to see that okay?
Yes, all
Right.
good.
Cool.
I'm going to hope that everyone can see it in the chat, and if not, hopefully they will let us know. Okay, so yeah, so like I say, this will be a bit of an overview, and then at the end, myself and Becky will be able to answer any questions, hopefully, that you guys have got. So we're going to start with an overview of our mission and values, many of which have stayed the same since Settle started in 2015, which I think is a testament to Rich and Katie, our founders. Our mission is that no young person leaving care should become homeless in the UK, and this was born out of the recognition that care experienced young people who were transitioning into independent living were having to navigate a much more challenging experience than those with the family support. Next slide, please, Becky. Thank you. So some key statistics that underline our support are highlighted here. Firstly, we've got the 1 in 3 care leavers become homeless in the first 2 years that they leave care. Secondly, 13,000 young people leaving care each year in England. And thirdly, 1 in 3 young people felt like they left care too early. Just to kind of put that into perspective a little bit. So out of these 13,000 young people, 1 in 3 who become homeless is 4,333 young people, which of course is too many, and we're striving to tackle this. Thank you. So following on from our mission, Settle's values have also remained the same since 2015. So that is grow the good, so focusing on building young people's strengths rather than dwelling on their weaknesses. Intention isn't enough, so going the extra mile to ensure that we deliver the impact that our programmes seek. And thirdly, young people first, ensuring the needs of the young people we support are prioritised above all else. So our model, our service and programme model is designed to act as upstream prevention, so meaning that we address the root cause of issues before they occur. We work with young people with low to medium support needs, so at the crucial point of transition into independent living, working to avoid any issues snowballing that will hopefully increase the risk of eviction, which we hopefully don't want. So our referrals generally come from local authorities that we are partnered with, and our support is included in a number of the local offers. We also work with some semi-supported accommodation and housing associations, which help us identify young people who will be allocated into that independent housing soon so that we can start work then. Our support is best placed to start between the period that the young person signs their tenancy and moves into their property to ensure that they are best supported at that transition and hopefully being as smooth as possible to set up everything that they need to do and to make sure any challenges are faced as soon as possible. So what we do. Settle programme is a wraparound support sitting amongst a wider support package with the Settle community and mental health project and financial support, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a minute. But the Settle coaches are all qualified coaches, and we use this support to build on the skills needed for sustaining in person's tenancies and avoiding eviction. We do this in the Settle programme, but the coaches' skills also sit with being able to explore the Settle community and mental health project if the young person would like to, and supporting them getting the most out of this as well. Thanks, Becky. So our aims. One of our key aims is improving financial resilience for our young people. Our team supports them with getting into work or claiming benefits that they're entitled to and reducing living costs through budgeting and planning. This could also be looking at bills, debt, saving, etc. Secondly, developing life skills. So helping young people to develop their practical life skills such as cooking, healthy, cheaper meals. It could be recipe planning, managing their home and tenancy. Then signposting to specialists, helping them get in touch with services in their local area or our established partners who can help, or alternatively, if Settle is not best placed to support a young person for whatever reason, then hopefully ensuring that they get continued support elsewhere. And then emotional wellbeing support. So as I mentioned, all of our young people have a dedicated sessional coach who provide that personalised one-to-one support. And we hope that that's a relationship that the young person can rely on throughout their duration on the programme, and then if they engage afterwards as well. So how we work. This is a little bit of an overview of what the flow of the programme can look like. So we tailor the programme to each young person, and there might be variations within this, but generally we have the young person referred to us, and then they are allocated to a coach. The coach will then follow up with the young person and hopefully arrange an initial session if they are interested in receiving our support. We then have an initial assessment and start working with the young person in the space that they feel comfortable. Sessions will then usually happen once a week for an average of 5.5 months. There's some variation with this sometimes, but these are just kind of what we usually see. We then look at 3 key areas of support, which is money, tenancy, and lifestyle. And then throughout the programme, in between sessions, the coach and the young person will probably have some actions to take to ensure that we're going in the right direction. We can help young people set goals, address challenges, and then these can all be reviewed as we go through the programme. When it comes to a point that the young person has gone through the challenges that they might have needed support with or doesn't have anything else that they need to work on, we would then start looking at opening up a conversation about ending the programme and what the plan will look like with this, whether that is additional next steps with their goals or any further support that they would like to access. We then have a graduation session, which is a space for us to reflect on the progress and the strengths with the young person so that they can hopefully leave our support feeling really confident about their next steps. We then check in with the young person after 6 and 12 months, but they can also access drop-in support, graduation events, and community events if they would like to. Becky. So this resource on the left is something that we use for our initial assessment. We usually have this, like I say, in a space that the young person is comfortable. So that's usually a cafe near their house, or it could be a community hub, for example. And then after this, sessions can be at the young person's house, or again in the cafe or community hub if that's where they're most comfortable. In this initial session, we will go through these 3 key areas of support. So money, tenancy, and lifestyle. It could be that the young person is really struggling with budgeting or dealing with debts. It could be understanding a tenancy or setting up their home, or it could be mental health support or work and training. It really depends on the young person's preferences and priorities. It doesn't all have to be completed, but it can be used as a prompt for the young person to share what they might need support with that they might not have known before. This is also looked at midway through the programme to make sure that we're kind of on track with what the young person's needs are, and also at the graduation to have a look at how far they've come and any additional support that they might need. Next slide, please, Becky. Thank you. So alongside this, we also have additional support that all the young people can access, no matter if they're accessing the programme remotely or in person. We have the mental health service, which is where we can provide 15 free private therapy sessions for the young people if they're struggling with their mental health. This is with a therapist of their choice, and they can choose the gender if they would like to, they can choose location, they can choose remote, they can choose so many things to hopefully make it as accessible as possible. We also have an interpreter service to support any young people where English is not their first language. This is completely optional. You know, if a young person would prefer to practice their English, that is also fine, but we have that support there if needed. We then have the Settle community, which aims to offer socials, employment, education and training opportunities, workshops, graduation events. There's so much going on, and that is also based on feedback from the young people about what they would like to see. This can be accessed at any time or after graduation, whatever the young people prefer. We then have the advocacy group, which is a project bringing together young people to explore how we can support them in amplifying their voices as change makers on issues that are important to them. We meet on a monthly basis and we cover a range of topics of support that young people might need. And finally, financial support. So we have internal grants that we can provide for our young people who are facing financial instability. This could be through supermarket vouchers, Argos home vouchers, smartphones and SIM cards. There's a real variation with that. And again, that's just through the young person's needs that we see. Thanks, Becky. I think that was everything. Like I say, that was a quick and whistle-stop tour, so we're open for any questions at the end. But thank you so much for listening.
Great, thanks, Emma. Great, I'm going to hand over to Kate now from the Rock Trust to introduce herself and then also tell us a little bit about the work that Rock Trust do. Kate, I think you might be muted.
You'd think we got used to that by now, wouldn't you? Hopefully you can all now see that presentation screen. Thank you very much for inviting me, it's lovely. And I thought best to start off because I know that many of the people on this webinar might never have heard of Rock Trust before. So I'll just start off by telling you a little bit about who we are, but then also about some of the differences between what's going on in England, Wales and Scotland from our point of view, and a little bit about our work. So Rock Trust works with young people between the age of 12 and 25. We only really advertise 16-25 because our drop-in centres are only for 16 plus. Any young people who are experiencing or at risk of experiencing homelessness, and we know that youth homelessness is different to that of adults and its causes, consequence and how it's experienced. So we want to make sure that young people have the right services and support that they need to make sure that they can avoid, resolve or move on from homelessness. We deliver services across around 8 local authorities in Scotland, so there are 32, we're only in 8 of them, but we also provide national input and direction for our partners, decision makers, funders and local authorities to help them make the change that's required to serve our young people well. Our intention is to make homelessness rare, brief and non-recurring. Well, in Scotland, the numbers of young people becoming homeless sit at around 8,000. They've been like this for a few years. They have started going up in recent years, and we will all understand why. But what hasn't changed is the main driver of youth homelessness, which is still childhood poverty. The main cause remains relationship breakdown or young people being asked to leave. And we know that the groups that are massively overrepresented are LGBTQI young people, those who are care experienced and young people with multiple needs. Now, when we talk about youth homelessness being 8,000 young people in Scotland, that is young people who presented to the local authority and been assessed as homeless. But we know that young people make up around 13% of the population in Scotland, but 22% of the homeless assessments in Scotland. So they're very overrepresented anyway. And then within that, young people who are part of these groups are also overrepresented. We know that the best way out of homelessness is to have fair pay, affordable housing and the right type of support. What the Rock Trust provides is mainstream housing in communities with all the support that's required, and that takes many different shapes. But normally how we talk about housing is that it is the same as non-homeless peers. So we have family-like environments, so things like night stop and supported lodgings. We do small-scale sharing with peers in the same way that most of us do when we're students or young professionals. And we also can support young people in their own home and help them secure their own home and give them the support that they require. Now in Scotland, homelessness legislation has been thought to be world leading for many years now, but we are still on the catch up now with what's going on in England and Wales, in that our prevention duty is not in place yet. So at the moment, the housing bill is winding its way through Parliament processes, but it does contain a prevention duty. And that means that all public services will have the duty to ask and act about somebody's housing situation to ensure that we can prevent homelessness. But at the moment, that's still working its way through. In addition to this, what we have, and I guess what I was asked to speak about today, is our interactions and our services for young people who are leaving here and making those transitions. And in Scotland, a few years ago, we had an independent care review. Scotland, I guess, recognised that the care system was not working for young people. We knew that we hadn't done as much as we ought to have done to make sure that young people had a safe experience going through care and into adulthood. And we know that that has long-lasting impact on a young person's life as they get older. So there was an independent care review that examined exactly this. What was young people's experience of the care system? What were their families' experience of the care system? And how did children feel as they went through the care system? And after listening to all those experiences, we knew that something needed to change. And based on that evidence, we decided to make a plan for how we would make things better. And part of that was that we wanted to make sure that over the 3 years of the review, we wanted to make a plan that we knew we could put in place that would make things better. Scotland made a promise. We made a promise to all care experience young people that they will grow up feeling loved, safe and respected, and that by 2030 that promise would be kept. And for those of you who would like to find out more about the promise, it has its own website with a load of resources about how it was designed and what it's working on now, what the priorities are, what action it's taken. But essentially it works with all organisations across all sectors to look at their corporate parenting responsibilities and what they can do to help Scotland meet its promise to young people. So it's a really exciting piece. When we are going for contracts or applying for funding, we're always asked to talk about how we are meeting the promise and all of the principles of the promise. And I just love that Scotland has policy and legislation that talks about love. I think that's a brilliant thing. But in our work, this is important because not only do we provide services to young people who are leaving care, but we also try and provide some strategic direction. As well as being exec of Rock Trust, I'm also chair of Away Home, and that is Scotland's national coalition to end youth homelessness. Now, we created this in recognition that actually, if you want to stop young people experiencing homelessness and all of the trauma that comes with that, then you can't do it alone. If you leave it to housing and homeless services, it's too late already. So what we need to do is work with all other sectors to make that happen. So we brought together a group of national people that were either housing providers, landlords or property owners, youth workers, children and family services, employers, colleges, schools and teachers, justice and prisons, health and some specialists, and also young people themselves. We have a youth steering group for our coalition and it's called Off the Streets. And we work with them and they consult with other young people to make sure that young people's voices are heard in our work. But essentially this coalition got together around the table and decided that if we want to end youth homelessness, there were a few things that we could do. And we recognise that prevention is one of the best ways of solving it. We're looking at broad population-based approaches, also targeted strategies aimed at individuals and families that are at risk. But that one of the big parts, one of the easiest parts could be to look at systems prevention, so stemming that flow from care, prison or health institutions into homelessness. And to make this happen in Scotland, Away Home created 2 youth homelessness prevention pathways. One which was published in 2019, just before we went into lockdown in fact, that was for care leavers specifically, because they have so many protections and legislative and policy frameworks around them anyway, we just need to implement that. And another one a year or so later that was for young people who are at risk on a bigger scale. The pathways basically asked that we increase the understanding of the challenges faced by young people going into homelessness and housing, making that transition. So looking at how we can make sure there are affordable and supportive housing options available for young people so they don't have to be homeless as part of that transition to adulthood. That meant increasing the housing options and understanding the income issues. But also that we really needed to change systems, practices and culture if we wanted to make things different for young people. So that's the framework and the context in which we work. But what we actually do at Rock Trust is we provide housing services. So we provide rent deposit schemes and private sector tenancies. We do shared supported accommodation and a lot of our small scale shared housing. has a live-in volunteer. So normally we would recruit a social worker, com-ed student to live with the young people and serve as a bit of a role model in the flat. We also have single supported accommodation, which includes parent and baby flats, where we provide visiting support and provide visiting support to any young person in their tenancy who needs help to keep it. And we also provide housing first for youth. Hopefully you'll all understand what housing first is. It was first coined for adults, but we've provided it for young people for the last 7 years, and it's growing every year. But it offers young people an unconditional tenancy with support for as long as they need it. In addition to all the housing models that Rock Trust provides, we provide lots of support services. So we have early interventions such as the Upstream project in schools. We provide support for teachers and families to reduce issues and resolve risks and reduce risks. We work with care leavers in order to prepare them for care leaving, but also using skill building and relationships to help them and walk alongside them as they make their transition from care. We provide emergency advice. We are based in some local authority offices or in our drop-in centres themselves or our hubs. And in those drop-in centres, we also have things like showers and laundry and food prep and group work activities, DWP drop-ins and health drop-ins, etc. We do a lot of work around community integration and recognition that if young people feel connected to the area they live in and their communities around them, they're more likely to be able to settle well. So that includes language lessons, mentoring, befriending, and social supports. For the last almost 10 years now, I think, we've been providing health and wellbeing services. So we provide art therapy, group work, and one-to-one sessions, and some other therapies, but we also do lots of training and skill building to help people build and protect their resilience moving forward. Alongside that, we do employability support, and actually one of our most recent housing models that we started is a live-in work scheme, offering really affordable accommodation for young people who are in work or want to step into work, where some of the transitional accommodations might be too expensive. And we provide training bursaries and opportunities for volunteering and amongst all of that. For young people leaving care specifically, we have 2 models that we know have worked really well, and both of them offer support and housing. So one of them is Housing First for Youth, and we recognise that whilst this was developed for people who had been rough sleeping or were quite entrenched in homelessness, the reason it worked is because it offered people who'd never had stability some stability, but it offered them a home that wasn't dependent on them reaching a certain stage of development before they were able to secure it. We realised this would work for young people in care who'd had multiple transitions and multiple workers and multiple cliff edges in their lives. And actually the safety and stability of a home that was your choice with intensive long-term support could really work for this age group. So we began providing Housing First for Youth. So essentially we offer young people tenancies. They're not our tenancies. We also help them secure them through housing partners. That provides a bit of a secure base for them. And we'll also allow them to meet their worker really early on in their stage before they get their housing, and lots of conversations will take place to make sure that the housing is of their choice, and they then get to decorate and furnish it and then learn to live in it. And the priorities that they set are the ones we work on with them, regardless of what we think might be a priority. And I think that works because not only the house provides a secure base, but also the relationship does. And the relationship doesn't end if the young person chooses to move or when they reach a certain stage of learning. The relationship will stick with them, regardless of what happens, until they're ready to end that relationship. We also have a service that we call My Place, which is a shared service, and it tends to be houses, some of which local authorities will buy back off the private market. So as many as 4 bedrooms, but one of those bedrooms will be taken up by a live-in flatmate, again a volunteer, and workers will make regular visits to the young people in their house or out and about in their community. And it's more of a transitional housing for those who may never have tried living independently or tried it and didn't like it, it didn't work for them. But also it gives them a bit of time to consider what they might want their home to look like and where it might be. So for young people who are looking for that transitional but supportive accommodation, they can come into our shared accommodation or My Place flats and work with us on a plan for the future. Now, both of these models work really well for young people leaving care because they give some choice and a sense of interdependence, but their intensive support is offered, as well as group work and other activities to take part in. And for young people who quite often are looking to escape the authority they might have experienced before that has not been helpful for them, it's still their choice how they engage in support in both of these services. And we believe that that's why it works really well. But we work from where the young person is and based on their priorities to make sure that the young person can stay safe whilst they're navigating their way into adulthood. So those are just some of the services we provide, and hopefully that's giving you a bit of an overview of what we do here in Scotland. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Kate. That was really interesting. Cool. So we're going to move on to some kind of like discussion questions for Emma and Kate now. Just a reminder, if you have any questions at all that would be helpful for Emma or Kate or myself to talk on at the end, please do pop them in the Q&A chat at the bottom, and then we can get to them at the end. Great. So the first question I'm going to put to you both is that you both like shared all the work that you do for young people, and it's really helpful to understand it would be really helpful to understand what your views are on what the differences are between supporting young people's needs compared to adults' needs or children's needs, for example. I don't know who wants to tackle that one first.
I'm happy to.
Yeah.
So at Settle, we work predominantly with young people aged 18 to 25, most of which are care leavers, but some who aren't. But all of the young people we support are moving into or have just moved into independent living for the first time. And most have got very little or no additional personal support to help them with this transition, which is quite unlike potentially their peers who have family support network or existing skills that they've gained from living in a home environment. It could be financial support as well, or children who are perhaps expected to be receiving a lot more additional support, and then those who have transitioned out of this period of young people that we work with may already feel able to do that. We see a lot of young people in this group facing similar challenges, which can be really different to their peers of a similar age. This could be managing housing repairs, navigating the benefit system, understanding rights and responsibilities, or navigating being in a refugee or asylum seeker and not speaking English or very little of it. So as I say, that those young people are in this transitional period between childhood and adulthood, where often children have this more regular and higher level support, and adults are, I guess, supposed to be independent and need less of this, but it's really important to think about how they're able to do that without support during this transitional period. So Settle's coaching technique is a really key element of how we support young people to become more independent and confident with their transition, to advocate for themselves and have more understanding of what they need and how to access any additional support and services that they need. Also with our set but flexible program, which addresses needs to be supported right at that transitional period, from pre-move on support to ready young people for that move, or more practical support facing the concerns that they have when they have moved out, such as like setting up their bills or getting furnishings, for example. These young people might have had support before from, foster carers, personal advisors, social workers, but when transitioning independence, this can reduce significantly, and sometimes young people are left to navigate this new change with potentially very little support. So at Settle, we really want to ensure that these young people don't face the care cliff that many have before, and provide the support that they should have. We also make sure that all young people are equally supported within the programme around these challenges and needs, regardless of care experience, background, language barriers, and we've got a lot of variations of support to address these needs as well.
Yeah, I would agree with everything that Emma's just said. I think there are a couple of things that make young people different from adults or children. And I think firstly, they're disadvantaged in the system, they're doubly disadvantaged in the system. So young people tend to be in lower paid work, 0-hour contracts, so less secure, lower paid work, which means that affordability and income are massive factors. And then they also are less likely to have references or a deposit to be able to get access to kind of accommodation choices available to them. So I think they're disadvantaged in the housing world anyway. And in Scotland, I don't know if I said that, I should have said that. In Scotland, you can leave care or leave home at 16. So you're considered an adult at 16 rather than 18 as it is south of the border. So we do have 16-year-olds who are kind of in this position. I think the housing system and the labour market makes young people disadvantaged anyway. And then we also have adolescence. So in terms of brain development and what's going on in the adolescent brain at that point in their lives, I think is massive, because it means that their perspectives are very different on how they are taking risk and how they're able to understand the choices available to them, or to make those kind of decisions and understand the consequence of them. So I think it can be quite a difficult time for young people anyway. And when you combine that with going through what can be a massive transition, and which can be also mean they're exposed to traumatic experience, and whether that's in the relationship breakdown that leads to needing to make that transition, or their past with their families or their care histories. So I do think that young people need a slightly different approach in terms of the system that provides it and the support that they require.
Thanks, Kate. That's really helpful. And thanks, Emma, as well. Kate, I just had a question actually about sort of like you mentioned, like the structure of the housing system can be a bit of a challenge. I thought it was really interesting in your presentation that you spoke about how when young people access your services, they have like what seems like real choice in like working with you about where they'd like to live, what they'd want their property to look like, and like choosing those things. I just wondered, how is that something that the like sort of standard structure is in terms of like how housing is allocated across people in Scotland, or is that something that's available only through like your services? Because I guess, like you say, the other side of the border, we don't really see much opportunity for young people to choose kind of any element, I guess, of like where their housing is or what their housing looks like if they're being allocated social housing.
Scotland is in a very similar position to England and Wales, where we have a housing crisis here as well. But our Housing First programme is built with housing partners. So it's built to offer young people who've had no stability and had no choice or say in their lives, and particularly those leaving care. It's built to enable that as part of their housing journey. So the principles of Housing First are that the people involved, the participants, have some choice and control, because that's a really important part of it. It's not the same for every housing. We have our supported houses, which are shorter stay transitional houses. Young people get a choice in how their room is decorated, for example, and they get budgets for doing things like that, but they don't necessarily get it for all accommodation options. And I guess we know that it's being able to make a house a home that helps young people settle and stay there, but also make sure that they understand that it's theirs and that they get to make it home, because otherwise it's just a place they're staying for a little while. So that's what we try not to do. But yeah, we're in a very similar position to south of the border. Since we've written the pathways, and now local authorities and the government are working to implement those, we've had some really nice relationships established between social work departments and housing partners, where they've created kind of stock of housing that young people get to move straight onto, so they don't have to do the staircase model of, staying in a hostel and kind of going through the processes. lots of points of potential failure for them. But so we've had some really nice partnerships in housing with housing and social work, which have made the transition a lot easier. And we're seeing that starting to grow now across Scotland, which is brilliant. But that's because pathways are now being implemented.
Thank you. Great, thanks both. Yeah, and then I guess the next question that I'd be interested to hear your thoughts about is, what is, in your view and in your work, what is the most important factor to consider when building relationships with young people that is going to go on to improve outcomes for young people as well?
I'll take this one first, Emma. I think we realised quite quickly after starting a Housing First programme especially, and in Housing First, I guess when we read it, we thought the housing is the thing that provides a secure base for young people, and then they can grow from there and build their resilience from that point on. But actually the relationship is as important as the accommodation is. So yeah, they get the choice in the house and a say in how it's decorated and everything else, but making sure that the match between them and their worker works is really important. And we take a strength-based approach to the work with young people. And it's really, I guess, the reason Housing First became so popular and was actually so well participated in was because people had a choice in what they worked on. So there is no requirement to behave a certain way or to get sober or to be healthy in order to access the accommodation. The accommodation is yours, the house is yours, the home is yours. And you can decide what you want to work on. So whether it makes sense to us or not, young people can work on any part of their lives that they want to. And I think taking a strengths-based approach and facilitating change and decision making, I think is really important, so that young people feel entirely in control. But also understanding that relationship may be the only one that travels with them from here into adulthood, and has to then offer other connections as well. And so we even recognise when we're recruiting our team members for those services, we're recruiting people with those type of skills that can do that relationship building, and that we do a lot of talking around relationships and social networks and the importance of them.
Thanks, Kate. Yeah, there's a lot of similarities with us there as well, with the strength-based approach as well. And like building a relationship with the young person and the coach at Settle is invaluable for our support, and it's such an important element to consider when developing this relationship and ensuring that the young person has consistency and autonomy throughout that process. Like I mentioned earlier, the coaches are accredited under the Mo coaching course and allows them to really confidently support young people to address their concerns holistically with trust, and hopefully they're feeling empowered, which is really important for developing this relationship. Similar to yourself, Kate, we ensure that the needs of the young people we support are prioritised above everything else, and in sessions it's what they want to cover. It's not what we decide is important for the young people. Obviously we have things that we think are super important, but it's also important for the young people to lead with that. With this as well, transparency is really important, especially when we're navigating challenges with young people and ensuring that they're leading on these elements. That could be in sessions with raising a complaint or contacting professionals or providers and working together with risk assessments and safeguarding concerns. But I think also with developing that relationship, it's really important to consider that the young people might have had challenging relationships with professionals or personal networks in the past. So I think also being really understanding of that, but also clear about what support Settle does provide is really important, and what we aren't able to provide, so that they hopefully don't feel let down and know exactly what support we are there to provide. And we can also signpost and help them with getting involved in other support services if needed.
I'm just going to say there, Emma, I don't know if you talk about it at Settle, but one of the things we talk lots about is boundaries, and it's not so much about our boundaries as it is about helping the young people set their own personal boundaries in relationships. And whether we talk a lot about give and take, and it's as important that you have somebody, whether it's a neighbour or a friend, that you can ask for that cup of sugar when you need it, as it is that you have somebody that will ask you. So that kind of build that social capital is really important.
Definitely.
And having very clear boundaries around it. But one of the things I think that we struggle with, I think a lot of youth workers do, is we struggle with risk taking. So we've got to think about what risks, how to make risk taking safe and considered, but to not stop all risk, because that's part of growing up and learning and making mistakes, isn't it? So actually helping young people develop their boundaries and take risks in a safe way is like part of navigating that relationship, world of relationships again.
Definitely. Yeah. And like you say, obviously boundaries for young people, but also I think what helps the relationship is the coach having boundaries as well. And obviously with the young person seeing that and seeing that, you know, it is okay for you to have boundaries and it's also okay for me to have boundaries. And I think that's definitely, yeah, a really, really important point to consider. Thank you.
Great, thanks both. Cool. I guess you both kind of mentioned, Kate, you mentioned there around when you're like doing recruitment and training, like that building positive relationships with young people makes up a really important part of that. And I guess, Emma, from like your point of view, delivering frontline work to young people, I wondered if either of you had any thoughts about like what sort of training and skills are like have been helpful for both of your point of views in the past to like build those positive relationships, and what kind of skills are important to be able to do that with young people.
Yeah, so I think something that comes up is kind of, as we talked about, boundaries, but also like professional authority and kind of ensuring that you know where you stand with the young people, they know where you stand, but also for them to have the ability to advocate for themselves as well. And I think having a lot of support from the team at Settle to ensure that we are able to do that, whether that's with, so I mentioned challenges might come up with risk assessments and safeguarding concerns with the young person and navigating that relationship. I think having definitely the support from the management team at Settle to ensure that we're all co-creating that together is a really important element that I think we have consistently, and I think really helps to improve and support that relationship.
Yeah, we actually developed our own training. We found our team have always had access to a lot of training around relationship building, motivational interviewing, working around transitions, youth work, all of that. But we designed some of our own because we felt that working across the housing and youth sectors, we kind of needed something that was quite bespoke to us. But I think actually more than all of the training, the thing that's maybe most important is values and attitude. I think that really does matter, because you can teach skills, but staff really need to have a very clear set of values that they can work to. And I also think that the reflective practice has been really useful, because you just never quite know what you're going to face on day to day. So having reflective practice with colleagues as well, so you have a chance to debrief and consider how things went, or how they might go tomorrow, or whatever that might look like, and learn from colleagues has been really important as well. And we have staff members that are from a kind of youth work or children's work background or families work background, teaching and such like. But we also have people who come from the housing side of things to us. So it's a real mix of staff. So actually lots of learning goes on across the whole team, and people learn a lot from their colleagues. We've got some really experienced team members who've worked in a variety of services and now work in our Housing First for Youth, who'll, you know, be going out with naloxone one day and working with parent and child the next, and dealing with safeguarding, and so there's lots of things they have to deal with. But actually, someone who has a kind of attitude of going out there and doing what it takes is really helpful. Having clear boundaries and values is what makes that work.
Great, thanks, Kate. Great. So just to kind of like wrap up, I was hoping you both might be able to share how yourselves and how your organisations ensure that young people's voices are amplified throughout their transition into independence at all levels. So from sort of like frontline delivery up until like sort of organisational level too.
Do you want me to? Oh, do you want to go, Kate, or do you want me to go?
Let me go.
Yes, so as I mentioned kind of earlier, that one of Settle's key values is young people first, and within this, ensuring that we are amplifying young people's voices in everything that we do, from the one-to-one coaching sessions to community and advocacy work. We have young people joined our board as advisors, helped to design our programme, and we see it invaluable in bringing young people with lived experience into everything that we do. And since our inception, we've designed our services around the young people that we support, drawing on input and feedback to guide what we do and putting it into the frontline support. We also want young people to feel able to advocate for themselves during transitional challenges. So, you know, also in understanding their rights and entitlements. So in sessions, it could be supporting young people to use their voices with contact with providers, discussing repairs, or like even challenges with the healthcare system, for example. Like, it's really important for the coaches not to do it for them, but to do it with the young people. But also, like, our professional development at Settle is also rooted in a coaching approach, such as the managers are all accredited coaches as well. And this allows the coaches to feel empowered to create space for our young people to have their voices amplified. And then it's also prioritised in senior leadership team to empower the organisation as a whole, you know, generating ideas to improve our services for the outcomes for the young people. And this aligns with our value of growing the good, creating like a feedback loop from young people to coaches to managers and senior leadership team to like really further create space for young people's voices to be included in suggestions and cross organisationally for developing our support, which will ultimately hopefully support the young people. Have we still got time to chat about, like, we've also got an advocacy group at Settle to support young people in advocating at higher levels to share their voices alongside campaigns. This has been like an area of work that has been ongoing, but more recently it's an area of work that we're actively prioritising in the current strategy to really make sure that this is a huge area of work for us. We've also got the young person's newsletter that we share at Settle with our young people for opportunities for them to be involved with and opportunities for them to be able to share their voices, not just within Settle, but externally. But we're also working with these young people to have their voice at the centre of upcoming editions, to be written with the young people, not just for them. And finally, we also do a power hour with the full team for the coaches to share challenges and celebrations that the young people are facing to ensure that the whole team can hear our young people's voices consistently.
It sounds like Settle did some amazing work. I think Belfast have got a history of involving young people in design of services, and we've traditionally did exit interviews. So as young people are exiting our service, we kind of check in with them and do surveys and whatnot to try and make sure we're constantly working on improving our services and having that continuous learning. And then of recent years, I guess when we started designing the Way Home Coalition, we co-designed that with young people, and young people then wanted to form their own group, and they self-named it After the Streets. And they then went out with us when we were talking about the pathway with all of our partners and trying to drum up support for a way home and get people around the table. And the young people were really totally not really involved in that. And on an ongoing basis in Scotland, the Housing Minister and COSLA co-chair a meeting that looks at homelessness prevention and strategy. So what are we doing across Scotland and how are we doing? So kind of monitoring and making progress. And we managed to get a seat for the young people on that group. So now After the Streets is represented at that group at a strategic level as well. So we've done it all the way through our services. And we've had board members before. We don't currently. We have young people on our board, but not young people with lived experience. And that is just about organisational learning. But we do work to consult young people and have them heard at every stage, which is really nice. It means the housing minister here knows our young people by name, so he'll always make a point of speaking to them whenever he sees them and things like. So it's really good that we've managed to get to the point where young people are spoken to and heard and listened to properly, and their voices taken into account. And we've done that nationally as much as locally, which is lovely. It's worked really well.
That's great. Thanks, Kate. That sounds like some really great work. Thank you both for sharing. I feel like we've kind of run out of time, so I want to keep some time for some questions and answers. I think there's a couple in the chat. So thanks both for sharing. And we'll move on to some Q&As. Let me just open them up. Great. So the first one is, I think this might be more for yourself, Emma. So Robert has asked, is there an accredited life skills program that you use with young people, or do you create and use your own resources?
Thanks, Robert. Yeah, we do create and use our own resources. It's not an accredited program, but like I said, the coaches are accredited, but we use our own internal resources to support our young people with whichever life skills program, with whatever life skills they want to work on. So one of our coaches at the moment has been working on some recipe cards, for example, to pull together recipes from our young people. So that could be like, I think there was one that was a chicken curry, another one was like a noodles dish that the young people have created, and we have, well, this coach has pulled this together to create our own recipe cards, for example. So yeah, we create our own resources and use them in sessions where appropriate for our young people.
I guess it might be like helpful to add, we review these like on a regular basis based on the coaches that review them. So that experience of delivering support using those resources and how young people found them feeds into how we like develop those resources. Great, thanks, Em. And the next question is, there's two questions which are a bit similar. So what geographical areas do you cover for Settle, and then is Settle programme only London based? Are you happy to answer that, Emma?
I think you're well placed to answer this, so I don't get all the boroughs wrong.
Yeah, so we are pan London, so we deliver support all across London for young people. We may work with young people outside of London, but that's kind of judged on like a case-by-case basis. It's mainly because we like to deliver our sessions one-to-one with young people face-to-face. So that obviously creates some logistical barriers as to like how far you can go. And then we also have another question for Settle, which is Settle only for care leavers? Settle, we work with young people who like don't necessarily have like a support network. We typically work with care leavers and people who are entitled to their local care offer, due to our partnerships mainly being with local authorities and leaving care teams within them. So that's typically where we get most of our referrals from. We do work with young people who may be in like temporary accommodation or supported accommodation as a result of maybe being at risk of homelessness, or have left stable accommodation. So we don't only work with care leavers. We work with most young people who don't have extra like familial support networks, but at the moment we typically get most of our referrals from leaving care teams. Another question, are Settle and Rock Trust available nationwide? I will hand that over to you, Kate, in terms of Rock Trust. That question.
The work we do is only in Scotland, but we do work with partners internationally, including in the UK. So some of our services have been stolen, borrowed, learned from projects elsewhere. So our partners in the UK, and I can see some of them on this call, so I don't want to miss them out. But our living work scheme is very similar to the 1625 IP in Bristol. We also work with Roundabout in Sheffield, Clymai in Wales, and there are lots of other ones I'm probably going to miss out. But we all talk to each other and share learning as well. So there's probably quite a lot that will go on in your own area. And a lot of us are members of Every Youth, so a UK-wide network for youth homelessness and youth housing.
Great, thanks, Kate. And the next question is from Sandra. They've asked, we hear about children in care being the subject of child criminal and sexual exploitation. What has been the experience of this during that transition phase? From both, what are both of your experiences of working with young people during that transition stage who have experienced exploitation?
So I haven't had a huge experience of this. I've had one young person who might sit within this bracket slightly, but they ran the program really similarly. This young person in particular came over to the UK and she was getting ready for move on essentially. So we did a lot of pre-move on work, and then she moved into her property and we did some kind of as transition move support. Some of it was also around additional support that she needed, such as mental health support and making sure that she's got the right additional support, I'm saying support a lot, but in place around her. But I guess that shows that a lot of this, the answer to this question is to ensuring that this young person in particular had support from all areas. And I think one of her biggest concerns was kind of being alone and not having any support. So when it came to the end of our support, we were ensuring that she still had things in place to ensure that she didn't feel alone after having settled support. So that's the only experience that I have. I'm not sure if Becky or Kate would like to add anything additional.
Yeah, I think in Scotland we've just done a bit of work on it because there's been a bit of a investigation to see how many of our young people it has affected and how often we are seeing exploitation of young. And I do think we've seen it. I'm not sure for us whether it has been more so amongst the care population than the homelessness generally. We quite often see young people getting exploited because they have access to housing, or so we see them in kind of dangerous relationships to either gain security or because somebody else wants to use them to get security. So we see a lot of that going on, and we have had issues here because for very temporary accommodation, we quite often use B&Bs and hotels up here, run out of hostels and whatnot. So we do get into the situation where in some of our more rural areas where there's not temporary accommodation available, we may have hotels that are full of young people, and some of whom may well be care leavers, and become a bit of a kind of trucker stop where people know that there's lots of young vulnerable people living in one space. So we have seen it, but it's not. We've not seen the kind of gang-related exploitation that we've been talking about in the press and all of that. We've not seen that personally. And we have had some young people who have been spending time on the streets, being lifted off the streets and taken away, almost kidnapped and held hostage. So we've had that kind of thing happen, but again, it's very rare and doesn't happen very often. So we don't know that there's patterns as such, or that there's been an increase in it as such.
Yeah. I also just wanted to add that we all have a training budget at Settles. So one thing that when we knew that young people from these kind of experiences might be coming to join the program, we did some training. So myself and I think another coach was interested in the training to ensure that we, had as much knowledge and understanding as we could. But obviously, because we're not a specialist support, we just wanted to make sure that we had some overview of how we could better support any young people in this position. But then also I think an important thing is clearing ourselves up about similar services that are able to support them, so we are able to confidently signpost young people that do come through us. Yeah.
I think with sexual exploitation, it's very similar to the safeguarding. It's making sure that the teams can identify where it's happening and where it needs further investigation.
Yeah.
We're also a third-party reporting centre, so people can report things to us, which we can then report on their behalf. So if they're not wanting to engage with the authorities, we can do so on their behalf. But quite often we can support young people to do that. So yeah, I think it's making sure the systems are in place for the team members to recognise where it's happening and get the right support, isn't it?
Great, thanks both. Okay, got 2 more questions. So this one's for you, Emma. Do you experience challenges with engagement, and how do you tackle these?
Yeah, in short, we do experience these challenges with engagement. I think one of the key things with Settle is kind of we want the young people to want to engage with the support, so that's when they get the most out of it. But we have processes in place for when the young person has been referred to us, and we have periods of time, and we have checkpoints that to ensure that we have done everything we can to engage the young person in the support. But obviously we can't force them to engage in the support, so there is that element. But then also, once a young person has joined the programme, you do sometimes see young people varying in engagement. So again, we have things in place that ensure that we engage the young people as much as possible, but that we are also making space for young people who do want to join the programme. If some young people don't, because we only have a certain amount of space for each coach to be able to support a certain amount of young people, so it's about 10. So obviously if a coach has several young people that aren't engaging, you're just stopping support for other young people. But yeah, we do experience it, but we do, I think, a lot to try and engage the young people as much as possible and ensure that they are getting as much support from us as we can. But obviously it's not always possible, and so we do circle back to the referrer and ensure that they are back in the loop about if they're not engaging with us, so that they can access the support back with them if they need it.
Yeah, I guess I think coaches do a lot of work trying to understand the barriers to why people aren't able to meet, because I think a lot of the time we can see young people, I mean, obviously engaging with our support is optional. We do sometimes see young people express that they do want support and they would like to meet for sessions, but often it can maybe take a little while to get into their swing of things, or maybe engagement drops off. And I guess our coaches spend a lot of time trying to understand the barriers. Is something else happening in that young person's life that means the way we were working together before isn't going to work now moving forward? And how kind of flexible can we be to meet the young person where they are and meet them in terms of what's happening in their life. And I guess, as you mentioned earlier, the programme is quite flexible in terms of a young person can choose when to meet, where to meet, if needed. It can be online. And we kind of if something's happening in the young person's life that means they're not in a position to be able to manage to meet for one-to-one coaching sessions for a variety of reasons, is there something we can do to manage that, to put their time on the programme on pause whilst they manage something else in their lives? Can that be picked up at a later time? Is now the right time to be doing coaching support? Is there a larger need there that maybe we can support them with accessing support around? So yeah, I guess that it's quite flexible in terms of how we tackle those challenges. Kate, I don't know if you have anything you want to add around sort of tackling challenges with engagement in services.
Yeah, I think we do what we call assertive outreach, which is almost stopping harassment, but we do try and make sure we go out to places we think young people might be. So if a young person's not participating or not engaging, we then go out and see if we can't find them somewhere. And I think we try and just check in with everyone and say, is there anything you need? And if they reject it, that's fine, but we'll still be back the following week saying, is there anything you need? And at some point, they may well be ready to take us up. They might have got a letter, or that something might have happened that they needed help with something in their lives, and so we can begin to engage with them again, and hopefully, like you say, solve the problem, come up with other ways of offering them the service. Assertive outreach is what we call it.
That aligns with that kind of like what you're talking about with consistency earlier. So I know I know you didn't want support last week, but I'm going to offer it to you again.
Absolutely.
Great, thanks both. I think we have time for one last question. This is from Ram. We know that LGBTQ young people are at high risk for experiencing homelessness. What work do you do around LGBTQ plus people in particular, and what do you view as preventative measures to their becoming homelessness?
I don't know if actually you have it, and I'm assuming you will have it in England, but I don't know. LGBT Youth Scotland, the charity up here for LGBT young people, they offer a charter mark. So essentially, they come out and help you make sure your service is welcoming and inclusive for all, and then give you a kind of stamp of approval that you've done that, and come back and assess you every year. And we've done that for the last few years and worked on that, and I think that's meant that all of our internal policies and all of our external communications have all been very welcoming and inclusive, and it makes a difference to how we work and the way we talk, and ensuring that staff understand things like pronouns, and so they get training every year, refresher training. So we kind of have this program to ensure that we're all thinking about being how we are inclusive and how we welcome people to the organisation. And I'm not sure whether we did that and then ended up with more LGBTQ young people coming through the door, or whether they already were and then we did that. We don't quite know, but we know that we now do have a lot of young people, and we see it across homelessness more generally, and certainly the reports from LGBT youth here about how many of their young people experience homelessness is still really high. So we just try and make sure that everything is as welcoming as possible. And then we have host homes, so like Night Stop, and we have same-sex partners that are hosts, or LGBTQ people who are hosts, which then, makes a young person, especially if they're leaving home because they can't come out or they've been rejected, it makes it easier for them to have a safe place to go. So we do a bit of everything, really, work with partners.
Thanks, Kate. Becky, I don't know if you want to talk about any of the D&I stuff in this section.
Yeah, I guess my thoughts were probably quite similar to Kate's, in the sense like I feel at Settle kind of very conscious of like what message are we sending to people who identify as part of the LGBTQ plus community, and I think it's about creating that space where people feel safe to confide in you, to access support through you, to feel like they can rely on you, and some of that stuff around like staff training, Kate, that you mentioned. We also do like regular kind of inclusivity training and like awareness training around how we should be talking about people who identify as part of the LGBTQ plus community, and what kind of things we should be aware of in terms of understanding like young people's experiences. So I think it's about like sending that message that we are an organization who like will provide like a safe space for you, someone you can confide in, and seek support in as well. Did you have anything else you wanted to add, Emma?
No, I don't think so. That was definitely the route that I was going down, but also I think just a small thing like Kate mentioned with pronouns, I think is a huge I say it's a small thing like that we can do, but as in it really comes across that you're welcoming and inclusive, right? Whether it's on our email signatures or the website, like just showing that we are open for young people to be who they would like to be. And I think it might be worth us looking into whether England have got that thing that you mentioned, Kate, in Scotland, about almost being, what would you like, being registered?
The charter mark, yeah, it's the LGBT
Yeah.
charter, and schools have it up here. So
Yeah.
school clubs have it, and then so we got it, and then I think a few homeless organisations now have it as well. I think more people are thinking about it, especially since a lot of organisations are set up for one particular gender. Then they kind of start
Yeah.
questioning how they, yeah. So
Interesting. Yeah. Thank you.
Great, thank you both. Well, that brings us to the end of our session, and we've managed to answer all the questions. I will pop my contact details in the chat, so if anybody else has any questions or want to follow up with Kate or Emma at all, I can put you in touch with them. But thanks for joining, and thank you so much, Emma and Kate, for sharing your experiences and how you work. I'm sure everyone's found it very useful. And yeah, I think we'll leave it there. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, everyone.